Chapter 1. The Spark That Faded. James Carter sat on the edge of his bed, staring blankly at the crumpled rejection email on his screen. It was the 5th investor who had turned him down this month, and the 23rd since he had launched his startup idea 6 months ago. The weight of disappointment pressed down on his chest like a stone, and for the first time in a long time, James felt like maybe he had made a terrible mistake. Just a year ago, James had left his job as a senior marketing manager at a reputable firm. Everyone called him crazy for doing it. He had a stable salary, a respected role, and a clear path forward. But James wanted more, something meaningful. He wanted to create a platform where people could share their real journeys, not just the highlight reels. He named it Second Wind. The idea was simple but powerful, a place where entrepreneurs, creators, and everyday people could share stories of failure, struggle, and resilience. But now, with no funding, dwindling savings, and an ever-growing sense of doubt, James wondered if he had bet everything on a foolish dream. He closed his laptop and lay back, staring at the ceiling. He thought about the night he came up with the idea, sitting at a cafe, overhearing a young woman talk about how failure had crushed her spirit. He wanted to build a space that told people, "You're not alone." But now he felt more alone than ever. His phone buzzed, a text from his friend Alan. "Hey, still meeting tonight?" James sighed. He almost texted back to cancel, but stopped himself. Maybe some fresh air and honest conversation would help. That evening, they met at their usual diner. Alan listened as James poured out his frustration. "I don't get it," James said. "The idea is solid. People need this. But no one wants to invest. Maybe they're right. Maybe this isn't worth anything." Alan took a sip of his coffee, then looked James in the eye. "You're not wrong about the idea, but you're making it alone. That's your biggest problem." James frowned. "What do you mean?" "You're trying to carry a vision, a product, a business, all on your shoulders. That's how people burn out. You need help, a team, people who believe in the mission as much as you do." James looked away, ashamed. "I thought I had to prove it could work before asking for help." Alan shook his head. "No one builds anything great alone. Maybe it's time to rebuild, not the product, but how you're going about it." That night, James couldn't sleep. His mind replayed Alan's words over and over. He had been so focused on the destination that he forgot the journey was meant to be shared. He opened his laptop and stared at the home page of Second Wind. It was quiet, empty. But maybe, just maybe, it could still become something, if he could find the courage to begin again. Chapter 2. Echoes of Failure. The next morning, James sat in his tiny apartment with a cup of lukewarm coffee and a notepad that had seen better days. The enthusiasm he once had for Second Wind had dimmed, replaced by an ever-growing pile of failure. He couldn't stop thinking about all the people who had dismissed him, questioned his judgment, or simply ghosted after initial interest. He went back through every rejection email, scribbling down what each investor had said. Some were cold and curt, "Not interested at this time." Others were polite but vague. "Impressive idea, but not a fit for us right now." A few had offered detailed critiques. One comment stood out. "You're trying to fix something noble, but noble doesn't always scale." He stared at those words for a long time. That afternoon, he decided to visit a local co-working space for inspiration. He hadn't been there in months. It felt foreign, buzzing with energy, hope, the hum of young founders pitching, planning, dreaming. He wasn't sure if he still belonged in that world. He found an empty desk, plugged in his laptop, and stared at the login page of Second Wind. The user count in the corner blinked. Active users this week? 3. James sighed. One of them was probably him. For a while, he just sat there, thinking. Not about raising money or launching features, but about the people he wanted to help. He remembered the stories that inspired him. His sister's mental health battle, a friend who failed 3 businesses before succeeding, the stranger in the cafe's voice that still echoed in his mind. What if the problem wasn't the idea? What if the problem was trying to impress the wrong people? He pulled out his phone and messaged Alan. "You were right. I've been doing this all wrong. I need to find people who care, not people who calculate." Alan replied in seconds. "Then let's start there." That evening, James, Alan, and Maya, a UX designer James had worked with in his old job, met over cheap tacos. They brainstormed not about monetization, but about mission. "What's the most real version of Second Wind we can launch?" Maya asked. James paused. "Raw, human, imperfect. No gamification, just stories." Alan nodded. "Let's build for 10 people who need this, not 10,000 who'll forget it." It was a humble plan, but for the first time in months, James felt hope rise, not from external praise, but from internal clarity. He reopened the Second Wind admin dashboard that night and deleted half the features. He rewrote the welcome message to say, "This is a place for the broken, the tired, the rebuilding. Welcome home." He went to sleep unsure of the future, but more certain of himself. Failure hadn't ended the journey. It had only echoed loud enough for him to finally hear what truly mattered. Chapter 3. A Plan Reborn. The following week, James, Alan, and Maya met in Maya's living room, which had been converted into a makeshift war room. Sticky notes covered the walls. Laptops hummed. Whiteboards bore hand-sketched mock-ups of what Second Wind could become. Stripped down, real, community first. James pitched an idea. Instead of building a fully polished app, they'd launch a minimum viable site. A raw space where people could write anonymously and others could respond with support. "No sign-ups, no ads, just stories," he said. Maya nodded. "And let's moderate by hand, at first. Keep it human." Alan added, "Let's ask 10 people we trust to share the first stories, set the tone." They each reached out to friends, family, former colleagues. Some were hesitant, others eager. Within a week, they had their first batch of real, unfiltered stories. On launch day, James felt a mix of nausea and excitement. The site looked basic, almost embarrassingly plain, but it was real, honest. The first story came in at 8:43 a.m. It was from a nurse who had failed the MCAT twice and had just decided to pivot into public health. Her final line, "I thought I had to succeed in one narrow way. I was wrong." James stared at it for minutes. He whispered, "This is why we built this." By midnight, there were 22 stories and dozens of comments. People didn't want perfection. They wanted to be heard. Second Wind had finally taken its first true breath. Chapter 4. Building from the Bottom. Momentum trickled, not surged, but that was fine. They added one small feature at a time. A hug button. A tag system for types of struggle. A weekly digest email titled, "You're Not Alone." Users began emailing them, thanking them. Some asked for mentorship. Others offered to volunteer. They hosted their first virtual meetup. Only 11 people showed, but the stories shared brought everyone to tears. A laid-off engineer, a mother who lost her small business, a high school student navigating depression. Maya started keeping a scrapbook of quotes from the platform. "This one got me through today. I never thought strangers could understand me better than friends." Alan suggested a small donation button. They were skeptical, but surprisingly, people donated. A few bucks here, $10 there, enough to cover basic hosting costs. James began writing a weekly blog reflecting on the struggles behind building Second Wind. He didn't hide the lows. In one post, he wrote, "We are all under construction. That's the whole point." And slowly, the word spread. Chapter 5. Winds of Doubt. Not everyone understood Second Wind. A viral tweet mocked the site. A tech critic called it a sob circle disguised as a startup. A few users posted harmful content that required immediate takedown. James lay awake one night, wondering if it had all been a mistake. He turned to the community. He posted his doubts directly on the site. What if this isn't helping? What if we're just amplifying sadness? The next day, responses poured in. One read, "This place got me through my divorce." Another, "You reminded me I wasn't broken, just bruised." James wept. It was okay to doubt. It was okay to ask. But the answers reminded him they were building something real. Chapter 6. Turning Tides. Second Wind began to find its rhythm. A therapist wrote an article about the platform. Universities reached out asking if they could integrate it into student mental health resources. Alan organized a storytelling challenge. Share your lowest point and what you learned from it. Hundreds participated. Media outlets picked up the story. The website where people fail out loud. James, always hesitant about attention, agreed to do one podcast interview. His raw honesty made it go viral. Traffic spiked, but more importantly, stories deepened. A community was truly forming. Not just readers and posters, but people checking in on each other month after month. Chapter 7. Burnout and Breakthrough. Success brought stress. Moderation demands grew. Technical bugs piled up. James felt stretched thin. He missed meals, skipped calls, snapped at Alan, ignored Maya's suggestions. One night, he collapsed from exhaustion. Maya and Alan staged an intervention. "This isn't sustainable," Maya said. "We're not trying to be heroes," Alan added. "We're building something that lasts. That means rest, too." James took 2 weeks off. The team handled everything. When he returned, he saw the site was still running, thriving even. He realized the truth. Second Wind wasn't his burden. It was their shared purpose. He let go of control, and in doing so, found strength again. Chapter 8. Expansion. They launched new features, peer-to-peer encouragement threads, audio story uploads, mentorship circles. Second Wind partnered with mental health organizations, college groups, and even corporate wellness programs. What started as a lonely idea now resonated with thousands. Revenue trickled in through sponsorships, donations, and new premium content offerings that didn't compromise the mission. The balance between growth and integrity became James's new North Star. The mission never changed: to honor struggle as part of growth, to make space for the messiness of becoming. James hired part-time moderators. Maya brought in interns. Alan formalized an advisory board. The team evolved, diverse, passionate, and all driven by the platform's purpose. They were invited to speak at events. A TEDx talk went viral. Second Wind appeared in a national magazine feature where failure finds its voice. James began to feel something he hadn't felt in years: hope without fear. He walked into a town hall and said, "We are no longer trying to prove we belong. We are showing what belonging looks like." A standing ovation followed, not because of him, but because people finally saw themselves in something real. Chapter 9. The Long Climb. Years passed. Setbacks still came. A major outage, a failed mobile app version, a harsh news article criticizing their open posting model. But they kept climbing. James became a speaker, a mentor to founders, and an advocate for failure-positive culture. He wrote a book, Rise Again: The Power of Not Giving Up. It hit bestseller lists, not because it was perfect, but because it was true. In it, he shared not just wins, but wounds: the sleepless nights, the self-doubt, the therapy, the team disagreements, the lost friendships, the comebacks. Second Wind reached 100,000 active users, not because of virality, but because of trust. Real people sharing real stories. A user wrote, "I was going to quit everything. Then I read someone else's story. Now I'm still here, still trying." That became the new slogan: "Still here, still trying." It printed on t-shirts, posters, even tattoos. Chapter 10. Full Circle. One rainy morning, James stood at the entrance of a small college auditorium. 10 years had passed since that first rejection email. Now he was the keynote speaker. The event was called Resilience Summit. Hundreds of students waited inside. James looked down at his notes, then set them aside. He walked on stage, took a deep breath, and said, "I used to think success was about proving people wrong. But it's really about proving to yourself that you're still worthy even when you're at your lowest." He told them everything: the failures, the burnout, the moments when he wanted to disappear, and how showing up again, imperfect, unsure, and scared, was where everything began to change. When the talk ended, a long line formed. Students wanted to share their own stories. One whispered, "Your story saved me." That night, James logged into Second Wind. He read a post by a teenager who had just been rejected from art school. It ended with, "But maybe failure isn't the end. Maybe it's just my turn to rise again." James smiled. He didn't know that one story would be read by thousands, or that years later that same teenager would join Second Wind as a developer. But he knew this: the spark that once faded had become a fire passed from person to person, and it would never go out. Thanks for watching. Take action today, not tomorrow. Press subscribe. And let's keep learning together. You're doing great. See you in the next one. Stay strong.